Good afternoon, Saitlanders. Is the microphone working? It looks like it, and I believe that the camera is working. Eskom. I promised you a video about the increases in tariffs over recent years, and I've been doing some research. I'm not a fundi on this subject, but it seems as if we're able to obtain all of the necessary information fairly easily. And I'm going to go back a little bit to 1988 to set the scene for you, because this really does become quite scandalous, disgusting actually. And I urge you, as you watch this video and as you listen to all these facts and figures and what have you, to just imagine what would your reaction have been if somebody had told you this in 1990, 1992, or 1994. And by that I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't have voted yes, for example. That's just an example. I'm not trying to irritate or annoy anybody, certainly not in my mind. I'm just saying, let's say you were a yes or a no voter. Let's say, and I think that this is a very fair thing to say, it may not suit you, and it may not be the position and the thinking of most of the members and the leadership of Saitlanders. It's besides the point. I think you'll get what I'm trying to say. Let's imagine that you were an absolute yes voter or an absolute no voter, regardless. But as a yes voter, you were one of those people who said, I doubt whether the African National Congress will be able to govern very well in South Africa, or govern South Africa very well, but the present circumstance is unsustainable for a number of reasons. Demographically, the population is exploding, therefore the strikes and the riots and the insurrection and sabotage and the internal conflict with the ANC and the external threats from across the borders are only going to grow. There's no ways that it can be stopped. We have found nothing to halt it or even slow it down over whatever period of apartheid. And the economic circumstances, or conditions rather, of the country are deteriorating. So I'm going to vote yes. So there you are. I think a somewhat fair-minded person, somebody who might have had their doubts about the brilliance of multiracial democracy, but you were going to vote yes. Now then, as we vote yes for the reasons given. Now you, on the other hand, you may have been an ardent no voter. You might have said, I don't care whether the ANC is good, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. I refuse to vote yes. No argument will persuade me. I'm going to vote no. Now, either of those two parties, regardless, how would they have thought? And I'm not suggesting that they should then have voted no, because the yes voters' argument, to my way of thinking, is an argument that it's difficult to engage with it. It's difficult to say, you can only dispute it sentimentally. You can't really dispute it academically. And I'm I'm not trying to get up anybody's nose. I'm just saying, in the circumstances of the time, there was a lot of head scratching about, what are we going to do? There were still those people who were saying, I refuse. But many people were saying, well, okay, fine. It's great that you refuse. I also want to refuse. These communist maniacs are going to destroy everything. But what are we going to do? You see what I'm saying? I'm being fair-minded. I'm not trying to rub anybody up the wrong way. I'm trying to present a dilemma. And I think that that's not an unfair word. Dilemma, conundrum. I don't know. Right. So in that circumstance, somebody comes to you and says, listen, you won't believe it. Last night, I was visited by an angel. Angel, I'm telling you, it's true. I've got it on camera or whatever. I can provide you with a compelling argument, and you know me as I've never told a lie in my life. And the angel told me that the price of electricity is going to absolutely skyrocket. It's going to go from, let's say, 10 cents a unit to 3 rand a unit or more, 5 cents a unit to whatever. Would it have changed your mind about anything? No, if you were a no voter, you would have said, you see, I'm right. But the yes voter would have then said to you, so, okay, fine, but what do we do? So it was an intractable thing. Even if you hate yes voters, I always mock yes voters. I do it all the time, openly. As a joke and just to needle people a little bit. I try not to hurt their feelings too much, but it's a powerful joke. I mean, I do it in the shops all the time, and I'll see the report, for instance, on a Sunday or a Monday, and I'll spot somebody in the shop and I'll say, yeah, that's because of you. Ja, stemmer. Ja, stemmer. And it always gets a bit of a laugh or a wry smile. But still. And I think we all have this kind of intellectual quandary. We look at schooling or hospitals, the price of what it costs to have a discovery, the price of having discoveries equivalent to Addington Hospital in 1990. Does that change the right of black people to have access to the same as white people have? It's an intractable dispute. But it comes to mind. Would it have changed how I voted or how I saw things? And I have to say that I saw things very clearly at that time. The past almost 29 years bears witness to that. I can claim credit for having had in 89, 90, when I went to university, 89 and 90, in 89, 90, 92, 94, very accurate preconceptions of how things would transpire. I suppose it's a gift or something. And I mean how they would transpire, not just, it's all going to be a disaster. So listen to this. In the period from 1988 up to the 2008 electricity crisis, electricity tariff increases did not keep tread with inflation, so they were lower. This was partly due to the government's policy of keeping electricity, government's plural, the 1988 was, policy to keep electricity tariffs as low as possible for poor communities, but also due to Eskom having an oversupply of electricity, in brackets, in the 80s and 90s, but not investing in new capacity in the 90s and 2000s. So for part of or throughout the 90s, we had a superabundance of electricity, but it was also the time when provision was meant to be made for later, and it wasn't then and in the 2000s. Between 1988 and 2007, electricity tariffs increased by 223%. So over that inclusively 20-year period, increased by 223%, while inflation over this period was 335%. From the 2008 electricity crisis onwards, there is a clear and sharp inflection point for electricity tariffs in South Africa. From 2007 to 2019, electricity tariffs increased by 446%, whilst inflation over this period was 98%. Thus, electricity tariffs increased more than fourfold in 12 years. Okay. So we understand that inflation is a big thing. It can be rabid, as it was between 88 and 07. 2007 to 2019, it was not nearly so bad. Obviously, it's a shorter period, and inflation is compounded. So that 98% over an equal period may have been something like, what are we comparing, 20 inclusive to 12, 13, it may have been 200%, let's say. Okay. So we must bear that in mind if we're to have an honest conversation. Now, let's work it out from 2019. Okay, so we start with a base of 100. Whoops. Our calculator's telling me that it wants to work in algebraic mode. Right, so we work with a basis of 100 because it's percentage increase. So 1 is our basis. 13.87%. On the 1st of April 2019, your power went up by 13.87%. So plus 13.87 equals, right, so that's very obvious, it's 113.87. Okie dokie. Right. Okay. I've got 2020 here, but I'm being baffled by my own self. Okay. I just wasn't looking in the right place. Plus 8.1% in 2020. Right. We're on 123. Plus in 2021, there's a distinction that was made between bulk and non-bulk. We're going to use the number 17.8%. And some people might say that that's unfair, but others would say that it is fair. So, plus 17.8% equals, right, we've now had a 145% increase so far. Now we get the 2020 2022, which was 9.6% plus 9.6% equals, so over that period so far it's 158.92%. This is from the beginning of 2019, the beginning of the charge year cycle, which is the 1st of April. Okay. Now we add uh, 2022, which is 9.6%, we said. Okay. Then we add 18.65%, excuse me, was struggling. Okay. The total is 188.56. 88.56% is your increase, total increase in electricity fees, tariffs. So if you were paying 100 Rand in electricity, or let's say 1,000 Rand for the sake of a more realistic number, for your monthly electricity bill, in the year 2018 into the first 3 months, January, February and March of 2019, and then you started, so at the end of March you paid 1,000 Rand a month for electricity, end of March 2019. You would now be paying 1,880 Rand, 1,885 Rand, excuse me, 1,885 Rand. You have had, this is an average across the country, it doesn't apply equally to everybody, obviously. It's different for municipal, people who buy through the municipality. It's different for bulk. There are special concessions, but for the average Joe, you've had an 88% increase in just this short period of time, on top of the much larger numbers that we spoke about earlier. And the big one, the one that is striking, is 446% between 2007 and 2019. So really, the increase over the past few years, although if you give it a chance, it's going to become very, very, very much bigger. It's only just getting started. It's kind of in keeping. That's the way it's been going. Now, if you were to go back to 1988 and take it forward to the year 2028, 98, 108, or 2008, 18, 28. In 5 years' time, over that 40-year period, if you were a privileged white South African who just heard about the Afrikaner businessmen under the leadership of Frederick van Zyl Slabbert going to meet with the ANC in Dakar, Senegal, in West Africa in 1987, the scandal had just come out. You were foaming at the mouth, you were furious, livid, felt that you were being betrayed. They would have had their counter argument. And somebody had said to you, this is going to happen to the schools, this is going to happen to the hospitals, this is going to happen to the municipalities. Let's say they provided you with a photograph from the future of Tromsburg, Fourie Smit, Bridgetown, De De Aar is possibly the best example of verval in the whole of South Africa, by virtue of what it was. Not that it's the most dangerous, not that it's the most crime-ridden, not that the streets are the filthiest, or that they're overrun, or that property values have plummeted. No, there are many terrific things, but then you look at the railway station. That was the central hub of all of South Africa's railways. And so you see, just in that microcosm, as we've been making these videos over recent days that we've entitled Argumentum a minore ad maius, arguing, proposing, proclaiming a concept from the little to the great, using a small illustration to illustrate something much larger. Just that one thing about De Aar is actually of the most incredible significance to the entire country. So that if you were in that time and somebody had said to you, you're paying 1 cent a unit now in 1988, you'll be paying 5 rand in the year 2028, roughly speaking. Would it have changed? Would it have influenced the way your mind would have worked? Given that, if you were a no voter, it was probably based upon hardcore sentiment and doctrine and belief, conviction. And if you were a yes voter, given that it would have been based upon a pragmatic argument, much less doctrinal. I'm not saying the one is better than the other. In fact, if I was to tell you anything, I would say that as a Christian, we must accept that the doctrine of God supersedes everything. So at the end of the day, right is right and wrong is wrong, and God says that therefore doctrine is everything. But I, as an individual, am very much a reasoning person, a logical person. I am captive. I am a slave to logic. So what would I have done? I know what I did do. I know what I should have done. I know what I wanted to do but didn't do. And I just put that to you. To me, it's a very interesting thing. I know I've taken almost 25 minutes of your time now, but I find it absolutely fascinating to engage in these reasonings and to think. You know, you can look at it another way too. And I think of this often because I have a solar system. So I don't know what right I have to speak because I'm privileged, but I think of people struggling to pay, people on salaries who may have sons and daughters that can't share the same bath water. And, you know, all of these practical considerations in a family that lead to some families spending 4,000 or 5,000 rand a month on electricity without being wanton, without being profligate, without spending money badly. And then they're spending 7,000 rand a month on school fees for 4 people. And then because, and again, not because they're sending them to the best schools, but because that is the cost in school fees for the decent school in the suburb or in the district. You know, a family on a salary, I just my heart goes out to them. The same with pensioners. Perhaps they're using very much less electricity, but 1,000 rand or 2,000 rand a month on electricity on a 12,000 rand a month pension, which may have seemed like The deal of a lifetime 30 years ago may be very, 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 very difficult. And through no fault of their own. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, press like, share, subscribe. And if you'd like to support our work, please visit sakelanders.org, scroll to the bottom of the page, and you will find many easy ways to make a donation, which is very highly appreciated by us, or which shall be very highly appreciated by us. Thank you. Goodbye.